Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show, Colorado Business News. And joining me today is our Secretary of State, Wayne Williams, for part 2 of our 2-part series. Wayne, again, great to have you.
Thanks. Good to be here again, Aaron.
It's always fun having you on the show. Okay, we were talking about voter registration, and we're going to put some numbers on the screen. What has happened in terms of numerically with the state? Obviously, our population has been growing. Tell me just a little bit about what has happened with voter registration numbers over the past, say, several years, up to a decade. And the distribution between Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated voters, and what's happening with those third parties. And on top of that, you got more votes in the 2014 election than any other person in the history of the state of Colorado. Is that true?
It is for Secretary of State. That is correct.
How about for other offices? Not for other offices?
Not for other offices.
Okay, for Secretary of State.
So, but I was honored to receive a lot of support, work hard to try to follow through and make sure I fulfilled the things I said during the campaign. One of the things we try to do is make voter registration very easy in Colorado. So we have an online app. We were actually the first state in the nation to have our online ability to register to vote, which is at govotecolorado.com. We were the first in the nation to make that optimized for mobile devices. And so if you pull it up on your Android, on your iPhone, on your iPad, it's going to change the feel of it to make it easy for you to use with that electronic device.
So if I go to govotecolorado.com?
.com.
Okay, we'll put it on the screen. I can register to vote using my smartphone.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes. And my daughter turned 18 a couple years ago. She asked, how do I register to vote? I was the clerk and recorder. I could have brought home the paper form. But I said, go to govotecolorado.com. And she came down 2 minutes later and said, Dad, is that all there is to it? It really is easy in Colorado.
I made my daughter fill it out in paper form, so there you go. Well, if I'd known there was an app, she would have done it.
There's an app, and you can also just do it on a computer. There's a lot of ways, and it's important. You know, we've got an important election coming up in 2016. We want to make sure that everyone is able to cast their ballot, but we also want to make sure you receive the ballot. And so if you move, you can go to govotecolorado.com, and you can change your address online. And that's an important thing because ballots don't forward. You may not realize it, but even if you move across the street, or in a few cases even within the same apartment complex, you might have crossed a line in terms of where a district boundary is, where a ward boundary is for a city council, where a legislative or even a school district boundary in some cases. And so we want to make it easy for you to vote, and we want to make sure you get the correct ballot. And so ballots don't forward, because if you've moved, you may have a different ballot. So you can go to govotecolorado.com and change your address right there, and that way you're able to ensure that the ballot you receive is going to be for the races that affect you, and you can ensure that you get that ballot and it gets mailed to you, because we mail them about 22 days ahead of time here in Colorado.
What about encouraging people to participate more? Should we have a really active effort to get more people to vote? And aren't our turnout numbers, I mean, Colorado turnout numbers seem to be fairly good compared to other states, but still, overall, pretty poor, wouldn't you say?
Colorado has actually been third in the nation for the last several years, both before the change to all-mail ballots and after. We've continued to be third in the nation in voter turnout. So there really is an active feeling of being part of our community and voting and affecting outcomes. And we have close elections here in Colorado. We've elected a governor by 8,000 votes not too long ago.
You're talking about Bill Owens in his first term. Do you remember how many votes he won by in his second term?
A very large margin. I think the largest in history.
Take a guess.
400,000.
That's exactly right. I mean, to win by 8,000 votes in your first election and then to be reelected by 400,000 as Governor Owens was, what an extraordinary set of extremes, to put it mildly.
It is, and you know, before people know how someone's going to do, they're sometimes a little wary. They saw he did a great job and, you know, addressed some of the issues. I drive every day through the T-Rex project, which is one of the transportation projects that got built when Governor Owens was here. And so there are huge margins like that, but there are also really close races. When I was elected, when the Governor Hickenlooper was elected by about 2 points, I was elected by 2.5. Cory Gardner was elected by 2, and so they really can be close elections, and your vote may make a difference. There are elections that are decided by one vote. I remember a vote for mayor in a town called Monument down in El Paso County. It was a tie vote. And they had to draw lots. And the person who lost the lot drawing, his daughter had not voted in the election. And so your vote can make a difference. And so we really encourage people to participate.
I hear she's no longer allowed in the county.
I don't know that that's the case.
How about, do you remember, I think one of the really close statewide elections actually was for the State Board of Education a number of years ago. Do you remember who was in that race?
So Jared Paulus narrowly beat Ben Alexander.
By how many votes?
Maybe 106 or something.
90,
like,
I think.
Okay.
90 votes. Wasn't that the closest statewide race in history?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
I mean, that's amazing. Out of millions of people in the state, if 46 people had voted differently, you would have had a different result.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's why it's important to be involved. All indications are is that 2016, Colorado may play a key role in selecting the next president of the United States. So we want people to participate. We want you to be involved, and so register to vote. GoVoteColorado.com. Make sure your address is correct so that you get the ballot sent to you, and then take the opportunity to cast that ballot. Look at the candidates, make your decisions, and turn that in, because your vote might be very well one of those that makes the difference in who the next president of the United States is.
All right, let's talk about what you can do when it comes to campaign spending. In terms of reports, access to reports, historically it seems that the office has collected a lot of data, but in terms of the accessibility on the part of the public, it's always been very cumbersome. Reports are like, instead of accessible, the actual data being accessible, you get PDFs, which all you can do is really read. You can't do any kind of analysis. What's the office doing to make, let's start with campaign finance, contributions more transparent, and give the public a chance, including journalists, the press, if I may say, the opportunity to do much more data analysis of what's going on, so they can report to the people what trends are, where the money's really coming from.
So we try and make information accessible to the public, and so if you go to the Secretary of State's website, www.sos.state.co.us, you will be able to access all the reports that anyone has filed. You can search by various criteria. You can search by race, you can get totals, and you can delve down to find out where particular contributions were made. And that allows you as a member of the public to say, well, who is supporting this individual? Are they being supported by people in this community? Are they being supported by people from out of state?
Can I type in Wayne W. Williams and see all your contributions in a given year?
Yes. You can go in, you can find out the contributions, you can see who's contributed, you can see how much they've contributed. Now, Colorado does allow folks who give less than $20 not to be listed. And so they can, if you've only given $15 or $10 or $5 or something like that, not listed in that case, but every contribution over $20 is listed. In our system, it's available for searching. And one of the things we did, because
what if you gave $20 20 times?
Then you would get listed each of those times, because $20 exceeds that minimum number because it's less than 20.
All right, what if you gave $19 20 times?
Then
Let's say you just went to 19 picnics for a candidate.
The second $19 is supposed to be listed.
Okay, I'm not saying it is, I just wanted to know what the law was, so when I go to these picnics, I'm doing, well, actually the campaign's responsible for reporting, not the individual.
Right, the campaign is generally the one that's responsible for that reporting. Most of the campaigns work very hard to do that. If they don't meet the requirements, our office may levy a fine against them. If they still don't, that fine continues to increase. And so we do want to make sure that people do comply with the law. And Colorado law is premised on the concept that as a member of the public, I have the right to know who is paying for a particular campaign.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about that with organizations that don't disclose that to Wayne's office when we come back in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. For information about the program, who our upcoming guests and topics are, and ways you can participate, please go to our website. That's harbertv.com. And most of all, thanks for watching.
I'm Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland.
Hi, I'm Jim Cameron, Director of Avatar.
I'm Christina Johnson, former Undersecretary of Energy.
Hi, I'm Oliver Stone.
Hi, I'm Mike Peters. I'm the creator of Mother Goose and Grimm.
Watch The Aaron Harber Show.
I would encourage you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. It's good fun.
Watch the Aaron Harber Show because he's a really cool guy.
Please watch the Aaron Harber Show, on which I do appear.
I want you to watch the Aaron Harber Show. Grimmy watches it every day.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part 2 of our 2-part series with Secretary of State Wayne Williams. Wayne, we were talking about campaign contributions. You know, one of the big issues, it seems, and nationally, and so I'd be interested, is there a way is there a way the state of Colorado can play a role in this, is that you now have a lot of organizations hiding behind 501c4 entities, to some extent 527s in terms of multiple chains and all that, where voters really don't know where money is coming from, where donations, and in some cases multi-million-dollar donations, are being made, and the voters don't know about this. What can you do about that in terms of under Colorado law, and the theme of transparency that I know that you've always been promoting? Is there anything you can do to kind of move the ball, as it were, in favor of the public?
Well, there's really 2 issues. One is transparency, and the other is accountability. I think it's better if candidates and parties are responsible for ads as opposed to third-party groups. That way, if I or my opponent runs an ad that you don't think is fair, you can hold it against the person. But what Colorado's campaign limits have done, and some of the federal ones as well, is because particularly in Colorado those limits are so low, if someone wants to influence a legislative race, they look for another avenue to go through. And so that means it's not going through the candidate. And so if you have a close state Senate race, and we have several of those in Colorado in 2016, a lot of that money is going to come from an outside group. And none of the candidates are going to be responsible for what that outside group says. And without that accountability, it's then very hard to hold the candidate responsible. Well, I don't like that ad that was run. Well, that was People for a Better Colorado, and I'm making up the name, and if I happen to catch one that's not
I'm actually
not my
sure
fault.
there's a group
There
name
probably is. There probably is. People for a Less Better Colorado, or whatever the group may be. But no one has accountability for that group, and in part, our limits are so low. They haven't changed the way the Constitution is worded. The campaign limits for legislative races never change because the inflation rate is never high enough, and that's a good thing. I'm not complaining about a lack of inflation here, but they're never high enough to trigger a change in those campaign limits. And that causes that money, those people who care about an issue, whether it's a business leader, whether it's a union leader, to look for some other option as to how to donate. Now, the challenge here is, of course, that America was founded in part on anonymous speech that no one knew who was paying for. Publius writes these documents about why the Constitution's a really cool thing. And it may have been Alexander Hamilton and James Madison and John Jay. But they were anonymous. They were paid for anonymously. They were not ascribed to any individual. And so when the First Amendment is written in America, it recognizes this because the same people writing the First Amendment to the Constitution, providing for this freedom of speech, were some of those who engaged in the anonymous speech when this country was founded. King George didn't necessarily respond positively to folks who spoke out against his reign. And so the Sons of Liberty and others sometimes used anonymous speech to talk about an issue. And so that's the challenge you have between this desire that the government can't intimidate you, that your neighbors can't intimidate you from speaking, and yet we want to have that transparency. I think the better way is to try to encourage the donations, the political spending to come from the candidates so that they're the ones responsible.
Should we simply, I mean, clearly by putting limits on campaign contributions, especially low ones, we've driven money in another direction, and we don't know really where it's coming from. Do those who supported campaign contribution limits today, do you think, number one, recognize that that was a mistake, or do they think campaign contribution limits still make sense?
I think some of them, and I think putting everyone in one monolithically probably is not appropriate. I think some folks do recognize the challenge. One of the other responses has been, well, let's change the First Amendment to the Constitution. I'm pretty wary of that.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
I think the rights that we have are pretty important, and the fact that someone doesn't always use that right the way I wish they would do, and that's true whether someone may have use the freedom of the press to say something negative potentially about the Secretary of State's office.
I can't imagine that.
I can't imagine it, but they have the right to do that.
Well, what about the couple concepts? One is, of course, when you're advertising on broadcast entities where most of the advertising dollars go, that's essentially a federally provided service in terms of stations, for example, are licensed by the federal government and get their that benefit thanks to the federal government, giving them that frequency, that space, or whatever. So I think there may be some regulatory options there. But more importantly, even if you said there are no more campaign contribution limits, my guess is, and I'd be interested in your take, that the people who are happy with contributing in a manner that keeps them anonymous are not likely to shift their dollars to campaigns and are probably happy with the way things are now.
I think, though, you've seen a bigger ratio go to the anonymous groups as the limits came in for what they could give to the candidate themselves. And so I don't think it completely cures the situation, but I think it does adjust it. The problem, of course, with the airwaves argument is that most of us don't get our news now over the airwaves. We get it via cable provider or over the internet, and so a lot of the advertising is now directed where the cable providers offer you to target a particular district. So you don't have to pay, here in the Denver metro area, there are several congressional districts. There's dozens of state legislative seats, but by buying cable, you can buy it directly at the voters who can vote in your district.
Well, actually, and now the targeting's down to your laptop, your cell phone, your home or work computer. So yeah, no, I mean now it's really it's gotten down to a refined science.
No, when you're on social media, ads pop up based on your preferences and where you are.
Okay, less than a minute left in this segment. Mail ballots. How is your thinking about mail balloting evolved?
So mail ballots. Most Coloradans prefer to vote by mail. We've had some issues with delivery. We had a Democratic primary in Conejos County decided by fewer votes than ballots that were delivered up to a week late. And so one of the things I believe very strongly in is that we should have 24/7 drop boxes available for people to be able to ensure their ballot is able to be cast. People also ought to be able to make the choice. We used to have an opt-in system for mail-in ballots. 2/3 of Coloradans had gone that way. I do believe that people ought to be able to opt out. There are a few people who don't want the ballot mailed to them. They ought to have that choice too.
Okay, we're going to take a break and we'll be back with our final set of thoughts from Wayne Williams.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. We depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's and world's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to allow us to work for you. To find out more or to make a donation, please go to dmefd.org. Thanks for watching the show and for your support. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter and find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Your opinions, ideas, suggestions, and criticisms related to guests, topics, questions, or the host are welcome. Please send an email to producer@harbortv.com.
Welcome back to the show. This is part 2 of our 2-part series with Wayne Williams, our Secretary of State. Make sure you watch both parts, and they're, of course, broadcast and online. So, Wayne, let's talk about one of the issues, of course, that's contentious, photo ID. Do you think that we need to adopt a photo ID provision for voting here in Colorado?
I do, but you got to remember that 95% of the people vote by mail, and so the most important thing is to check signatures to make sure they match. In the last election, we had about 2 million people that voted in 2014 in Colorado, the last general election. We had 2 million people voted. We had about 8,000 ballots that were submitted with a discrepant signature. And that's after the individual was given a notice. That same daughter that registered to vote very easily at govotecolorado.com also got a notice that her signature did not match on her ballot. And she called up and said, "Dad, what happened?" And I went in and I looked, and when she got her driver's license, she carefully spelled out all the letters, and by the time she was in college, it was a scroll. And so I commended the judges for appropriately disqualifying it. She then submitted the documents she needed to ensure her ballot was able to be counted. In Colorado, you have 8 days after the election to do that. But we had
8 calendar days, 8 business days?
8 calendar days. Okay. And so you're sent a notice that says you've got 8 days to fix it. That's why the earlier you vote, the quicker you get that notice if there was an issue. So don't wait till the last second, please. But when you get that, we still had 8,000 ballots that were submitted with the discrepant signatures. Municipal elections don't have the requirement to check signatures, and so one of the issues that we are working with, and we work closely with the Colorado Municipal League on this, is to extend the provision for signature verification to ballots that are submitted in municipal elections. Lots of key issues are decided in municipal elections. Fire protection, what's showing up next to me, zoning issues, and so we want to ensure that that integrity is there in those elections as well, and we've worked closely with the Municipal League to hopefully make that happen this legislative session.
All right, speaking of municipal elections, a lot of them are held at different times than the November elections. That struck me as not making any sense at all. What's going on there, and would it make sense to try to bring them into the fold and have them be part of November elections?
I think it does, but it's not a decision for me alone. And so we've actually established in regulation a bipartisan election advisory committee. We're bringing in folks from the districts and municipalities as well as both of the major
You're
parties.
talking about special districts, I assume.
Special districts, bringing them all together. And one of the issues that group's eventually going to tackle is what do we do? Because right now in Colorado, you could have a groundwater district in February. You could have a special district in March. You could have a municipal election in April. You could have another municipal election in May. You could have a primary in June. And so what happens when you have so many elections is that the turnout drops significantly. And so by consolidating those and making it easier for Coloradans to vote, I think would have better results and people would be more involved in the decisions for their community.
I quite agree. All right, let's talk about lobbyist registration. That's another function of the office. In the past, it seems access to the lobbyist information that they provide was kind of awkward. It used to be that you could get it either as a list based on whatever company a lobbyist lobbies for, or you could get it by lobbyist, a list where it shows a lobbyist, a firm, or an individual, and everyone he or she works for. Doesn't it make more sense, or has this changed now, where you can actually, again, sort and access all the data individually yourself?
We try and make it as easy as possible, and we're continually working to improve the search capabilities on the website and to make it easy for people to be able to find what they're looking for.
So if I wanted an Excel copy where I can do all the sorting of the lobbyist list, does the Secretary of State have that online yet?
I'm not sure.
Okay, well,
But I will check and I will find out for you.
And on the one of the things that interests me is in terms of getting information about that there's no email listed, for example, if you wanted to ask a lobbyist a question, or so there's only a phone number, and I don't know anyone who uses the phone anymore.
Most people do use email, but we also closely guard our email addresses. We don't want the whole world to have it. And so just like the voter registration, we don't allow the email list to be distributed to other folks. There are some limits in terms of email distribution. But it is something that we do look at a regular basis to say, how do we make it more accessible, more transparent here in Colorado?
All right, now let's jump to the business division, which is really the bulk of the office. One of the issues I'm really curious about, our friends at the National Federation of Independent Businesses have sued the Secretary of State because you generate a lot of revenue from the business division and use that to cover other costs in the office. I'm just curious about the motivation behind that. It seems like if an office has one way of covering its other costs, that strikes me as an efficient way to do things. Obviously, they have a different opinion. Tell me about that different opinion.
Sure. The general concept of fees is fees are supposed to cover the service that's provided. And so when a business renews its corporate filing, whether it's someone's Mary Kay business or a large corporation, a portion of those fees now go to fund the elections functions in the Secretary of State's office. And that's been true whether the Republicans were in charge or whether the Democrats were in charge. Joint Budget Committee, consisting right now of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, has continued that funding structure. It's been signed by the governor. But businesses and the National Federation of Independent Business are saying, elections are really a general government function. Why should just businesses have to pay for elections? And in fact, businesses don't even get to vote in the elections. So doesn't it make more sense to have that be a taxpayer-funded obligation as opposed to business fees? It is one of the decisions that, in terms of funding, yes, it's easier to charge fees because, well, if you need more fees, you can just raise them. You don't have to go to a vote of the people, as Tabor requires for taxes. It's one of the issues that we look at. The decision impacts folks both in state government, but also lots of municipal and other governments have that same impact. Does a fee have to go exactly where it came from in order to be legal under the Constitution?
I guess we'll find out. All right, I'm going to give you a couple beefs. One is little guys now used to be able to have an account with the Secretary of State's office that you could pay fees from. And now, if you're too little, you don't want to make a big enough deposit, you can't do that. The Secretary of State in previous years got rid of that. So I want you to look into that for the really small businesses that are out there.
I'll check that. Most really small businesses and individuals do have a credit card, and you can use that directly online. So you don't have to send in a check. You don't have to send it in cash. We make it pretty easy for people to access, but I'll follow up on your issue.
Okay. Well, and that, kind of the final point is, in a couple uses of the system, you have to repeat everything. So even if you have a credit card, if you have 3 or 4 forms to fill out, you've got to put everything in again. So you should take a look at how do you automate that. So for example, if you buy something from a company and you filled in your name and address, and then they go to the credit card, that gets filled in automatically. You have that option. And same with when you file an annual report. You're still required to put in the same information that the Secretary of State already has. So take a look, see if there's a way to automate that a little better.
I only have one business entity myself, so I have not experienced that, but I will follow up on it and we'll see what we can do to make that better. We do want to make it easy and convenient for people. We also, of course, want to ensure the security of the system.
All right, fair enough. And Wayne gets the last word as usual. This is Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Aaron.